Gentiv and Good Shabbos. We are today beginning the holiday of Sukkot, and as we all know, Sukkot has many mitzvahs associated with it. It has the mitzvah of eating in a sukkah every single day and the taking of Lulav and esrog every day. And we take these mitzvahs for granted, just associated with the holiday, and we go on our merry way. But it's important to really understand where these rituals are coming from, what's the meaning, what is the symbolism, what are we supposed to learn from it. Now, the Torah actually tells us why we should sit in the sukkah. It says, Ki b'sukkos l'shaftis b'nei Yisrael, because God gave us sukkahs, booths to dwell in when He took us out of the land of Mitzrayim, when He took us out of Egypt, and He led us through the desert. And some commentaries take that literally, that we dwelled in booths, and others say, no, it's a reference to and symbolism of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence that was protecting us, perhaps in the form of a cloud during the day and a pillar of fire at night. But either way, it doesn't seem to actually fit in with what the Torah, the literal meaning of the Torah. When you read the Torah afterwards, and read the stories, we never find the Jews living in sukkahs. We never find them living in booths. We find them living in tents. And tents or booths might both afford protection, but they're not the same thing. So where does this idea of a booth come from? And perhaps there's something else going on here. And of course, the associations and the symbolisms that the early commentators say are true, but maybe we should understand this coming to it from a different direction. And that's the following. The Jews, before they entered Egypt, were of course descendants of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And the forefathers were all shepherds. And when they came into Egypt, all of a sudden they ended up in a society which was an empire. They had big buildings, big cities, the pyramids, and the Jews actually were building store cities called Pisam and Ramses. So they became city dwellers. So they changed from shepherds and nomads to city dwellers. Now, shepherds, what they do is they move from place to place. They're nomads. They don't have any permanent resident. And when you're traveling in the wilderness and you're taking your goats or your sheep and having them graze in different places, especially in some of the wilderness, which might be very hot, you need protection. There's heat during the day, and actually it gets cool at night. And if anyone here is familiar with some of the wilderness area outside of Jerusalem or any other place which we sometimes translate as desert, but it's actually wilderness because there is grazing land there for flocks, you will notice, if you go with a good tour guide, you'll notice that they actually have places where they see that for maybe centuries, and of course going back a long time, they built sort of temporary shelters. You put up some rocks, and probably at the time, we don't have that anymore in front of us, but probably at the time, they would put up protection on the roof to protect them from the heat. So the walls would afford some protection from wind, perhaps even from animals, and from the heat. And the roof would protect us from the sun, not so much from the rain, just like our sukkahs don't protect us from the rain, but perhaps from the heat, and also perhaps that would add some protection from the element from the cold also. And that is how shepherds would go from place to place. So they'd have different areas where they would graze their sheep, and they'd set up a place, and they'd make sure that when they come there, there was something, some protection afforded them. They might have had something that was built there from before, let's say, like I'm referring to before, some stones, and then they would put up some branches to afford protection on the roof. And those are what are really called sukkahs. Those are booths. And we actually have a reference to it when Yaakov left Lavan, and it says that he built booths after he met Esau, I believe. It says he built booths, he built sukkahs. In other words, that's what he was doing. He was a shepherd. He was going from place to place, and he created booths. I think it says there for his flocks, but it means probably for the shepherds that were taking care of his flocks. So, in short, the idea of building booths or sukkos are a reference to Bedouin and nomadic lifestyle. So perhaps the symbolism here is that we left our heritage, our tradition, our background, our past of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and we entered a foreign culture. And now we were enslaved in that culture. We're leaving that culture. We want to remember our past. We want to go back to where we were before, not necessarily on a permanent basis. The Jews don't go back to nomadic lifestyle. After they go into the land of Israel, of course, they conquer cities and live in cities and build fortresses just like everybody else. But the 40 years from the time they left Egypt until they entered the land of Israel, were a time when they were going back to the nomadic past. And that going back to nomadic past might have more meaning than just, oh, now we're back to where we started, but rather it reminds us of the beautiful past that we have, the forefathers, really what we're all about. So Sukkot might be really a reference to that. We're leaving Egypt, and now we're going back to our past. So that's, on the one hand, the Sukkah represents that symbolic act of saying we want to be like our forefathers. Now you take the Lulav and the Esrog. The Lulav and the Esrog, it just says, we take these and we're happy before God. But why are we happy? Because we're taking the produce of the land, whether it's myrtle, willows, the palm tree, and esrog. These are all products of the land. And after you're settled in the land and perhaps farming, taking care of it, then you have these produce, you're thankful to God. So the truth is, it represents a future. It represents, we're going to go back and we're going to be farmers and we're going to till the land and we're going to sow, we're going to reap, we're going to be happy, we're going to be successful, and we have to thank God, just like we're coming close to our Thanksgiving holiday here in Canada. So there's two elements. On the one hand, we want to remember our past, that's with the Sukkot, and then we also want to be happy about our future, be happy about our present and conquering Israel and the future, and understand that to be a good Jew, in a sense, is to meld the two. It's not to just live in the past. It's to remember the past, make sure that it's an important part of our heritage, but we also have to be able to move to the future. So actually, and there's a Hasidic custom, some have the custom that when they wave the Lulav and Esrog in the morning, they do it in the Sukkah. And it's actually putting those two elements together, perhaps very beautifully. And that's what Judaism is really all about. It's making sure that we're able to move forward. We don't just live in our, the dreams of what we were in the past, but we have to remember that's our foundation. And we take that foundation and we move forward, and that's why Sukkot becomes really a time of simcha, of joy. V'samachta b'chagecha. You should be joyous in this holiday where we just came out of Rosh Hashanah, the Yom Hadin, the Day of Judgment, Yom Kippurim, the day that God atones for all our sins. We're free of all our sins. We're in a time when the end of the season, the growing season, is over. It's the Chag HaAsif. It's also known as the holiday of the gathering in. Everything's gathered in, and we have thanks to God. And that's hopefully what we want to do, is we want to thank God for everything that we have. And although now perhaps we're in tougher times than usual, we still have to always thank God for what we do have, because there's always something to be thankful for and a wish for a future which is perhaps even brighter than the past. Good Shabbos and good Yom Tov.